What is going on, guys? It's been a while. I have been gone for the past probably 2 months or so, and it's been for a variety of reasons. It was sort of just a perfect storm of I just wasn't able to really put the time I needed to into this. There were some issues I was having with the channel where I wanted to make some changes, and that combined with I was doing other stuff with work. And it was also around the time when typically this time of year I end up sort of taking a break. I don't really do all that much. When growing up, I played like a ton of video games and stuff. I don't really do all that much anymore, except for about once a year when there's new stuff in really the only game I play anymore, Destiny. So we did that a bunch, had fun there, took some time off, and then really I was just focusing on doing what I could, and that really meant that I didn't have as much work time as I usually do. So that time had to be really dedicated into first and foremost my 9 to 5, because obviously I'm salaried there and like I can't just not do my job there. So I had to focus on that. And then on the side, I was working on Insider Viz, getting that ready. We recently had the OSU President's Buckeye Accelerator, which my co-founders, friends, team, we won, which was awesome. We got the $50,000 grant. We are moving on, and we are now in the Ohio State Accelerator, which means that for the next year, we're going to have access to their resources, personnel, work with them. It is going to be awesome. It's been a great program. I love the university, love the people. It is really, really, really excited about that. And I think Insider Viz is going to become really, really cool. We're going to do some really awesome stuff there. But that's sort of the gist of where I've been. And I guess the last thing I do want to talk about with that is the sort of my thoughts on the channel going forward, some changes and all that kind of stuff. First and foremost, I guess before I get into that, obviously, this is just going to be me talking through a bunch of things. It'll be a discussion on the channel. It'll be a discussion on programming skill levels, sort of the different things you need to know, and the sort of different contexts of just writing code and the sort of context where we all exist in software engineering, because it's such a vast space. So I'm going to be talking about that kind of thing. If that doesn't interest you, this isn't a normal sort of software engineering video like I usually do. I'm uploading one at the exact same time as this. It's going to be the React tips video. Basically, I just went through 5 sort of unorthodox tips on that would have helped me when I started React, stuff that I think would have been useful. Go watch that if you want that, but if you are interested in this, obviously stick around. And without further ado, I guess I'll just talk about, so why, how do I put this? I guess the best place to start is going to be why I have sort of become dissatisfied with where the channel was and where it was going and all that kind of different things. So first and foremost, I think, I should start with the history of sort of how all this happened. I started doing this back in November of 2022. And at that time, I had zero experience doing anything involving any of this. I'd never made videos before. I'd never really talked on camera before. I'd never really tried to do any of that. So I had zero clue what I was doing. I was really bad at it. And I was just kind of going off of what people I looked up to were doing and kind of just copying their general things. And then B, just kind of guesstimating. And the way I figured would be the best way to do it would be to just spam out videos as fast as humanly possible. Throughout all of November, I made something every single day. Led to some good ones, led to some bad ones, take them as they come. But overall, I think that was a good thing. I learned a lot, and it built a nice little foundation that was built a little foundation that was primed to be expanded on, which ultimately I think I did. But the problem sort of came when I came back in January and had fresh equipment, fresh stuff, and started going back at it again, which was great. But the problem is I didn't really change anything about how I was doing stuff. This channel and stuff needs to evolve, and it needs to change into something more, I don't know how to put this. It needs to evolve, because what I was doing is I was basically just doing the exact same thing that I was doing back then, which was my workflow was literally just like I would brainstorm concepts, come up with an idea, maybe throw together a code example for it, and then just talk it out first, cut through, no real detailed planning or anything like that, which works for some topics where I'm super comfortable with it, but it really blew up in my face in a couple instances, which I'll talk about soon. And ultimately, it sort of just resulted in me having to just putting out a video within a 5-hour time period, which is what I'd always done. Obviously, initially it was out of necessity, and then it just kind of became out of habit. And that needed to change, and I didn't really compute that for a while, but I think that's been a lot of the problem. And also, I think part of the problem is I'm trying to do stuff that I am not as familiar with, that I need to focus more on exactly what I know. And this leads me to talking about the next sort of thing, which is where I think I sort of jumped the shark on the issues, which was the last video I put out before the sort of hiatus, which was the high level intro to backend development or whatever, which really sort of just crystallized all the problems. It was not super well thought out, not super well put together. The concept is good. It ended up being this sort of mishmash of things where I would talk about some general concepts, but it wasn't super well thought out and it didn't have a super well defined angle. So it was sort of marketed at beginners, but I was really trying to do some stuff where I was talking about like server structure and that kind of thing and how I think about that. And it was just a mess. It wasn't good. And that I really didn't like that video at all. And I don't think it's so terrible it's worth taking down or anything like that, but I did not like that. And I think that there had been a lot of issues going in there. And I think I had kind of been talking out of my lane a little bit on a couple different things, like looking back, like the Go versus TypeScript, I think I didn't explain my thoughts as well as I could have. I think overall it was generally correct, and I still do maintain generally that that's my opinion on it. Of I would use TypeScript when I can use Next.js because I want the full stack type safety. But if I'm going to be building a standalone API that's just going to serve REST requests, I'm probably just going to use Go because it's really easy to write and it's really performant and it's really nice. There's a ton of great features there. And that's sort of my general take on it. But I don't think that that's a fair enough take for a video like Go versus TypeScript, especially when it's going to be targeted at beginners and stuff who they don't really get all the nuances of it. And honestly, I don't get all the nuances of it either because we need to sort of talk about, what I am and all the experience I have. So what is my experience? I am a 20-year-old junior in college. I am currently a mid-level back-end engineer at an app development agency. I literally said earlier I called myself a staff level, and this just goes to show how little I really did know and do still know. And I didn't even realize that staff was above senior. I just thought that I was like, oh, I'm just like not a junior, I'm just on staff, so I would be a staff backend engineer. But it's not what staff means. So I'm just a mid-level backend engineer, which basically just means that my job is to run through code all day. I'm not learning, I'm not being taught anything, I'm just pumping out code, but I'm also not a senior or anything like that. That's sort of where I am. And then I am been doing this for about 2.5 years, thereabouts. I started this I started programming in my junior year of high school. I had about 2 years of experience there, but really that experience boiled down to a lot of VB, C#, and PHP. So it was good foundational understanding of how to write code and how to think about code, but it wasn't useful for the stuff that I'm working on today, which is app web development type stuff. So that really didn't start until my freshman year of college when I sort of got into React. I started back when it was class components, or I guess it was sort of probably the twilight years of class components. My first big site was written in class components. It was a bit of a mess. It was like class components, Redux, and Firebase. I didn't actually know what Redux did. I had no clue. I was just following a NetNinja tutorial and kind of blindly doing things. I didn't really understand what was happening, but it got out the door and it worked. So that was sort of where I started. And then over the years, I've been learning, sort of went through a giant cycle of I went from React to I tried out Vue, and then I tried out a bunch of other different web technologies. And ultimately sort of came back to where I started with Next.js. And basically at this point, it's just the T3 stack, which is pretty much what I use every day. I mean, at the end of the day, it's really hard to beat the TRPC, Next.js, Prisma integration. I don't like Next.auth, but the rest of it is phenomenal. And yeah, that's sort of my history there, but that's about 2.5 years of real experience, and that's all TypeScript is a big thing there. And what I want to talk about is I have been doing a lot of Go stuff, and there have been some issues that have come up with that. And that's been a big thing that I've had a problem with on the sort of direction things have been going, because I was doing a lot of Go content, especially with the sort of the Better Backend saga or whatever, where I was putting out trying to come up with template guides for a starting point on Go projects, because that was a big hole I saw and felt myself of it's really hard to figure out how to bootstrap a project together. So I was trying to figure out a good way to do that. And pretty quickly I realized, and I've realized now, that the reason that there is no solution to the problem is because it's kind of impossible to make one. The Go backends are all so unique and different, and it seems like a lot of people have very different ways of doing it. There's no real opinions that you kind of just have to take it case by case. And that's a really terrible thing to put into a video, especially when there's beginners who want something tangible. So I sort of put something out there. I don't think it's a net negative, because I think that like the more senior people will just look at it and roll their eyes, which is fine. And then the more junior people will at least have a place to start and a place to go. And then they can sort of figure things out, and at least they're able to write some useful Go code instead of just getting stuck in figuring out how to even bootstrap the project together. So I think overall it's a net positive, but I think the problem is I didn't know that going in. And that's a problem. If I'm going to be making stuff on it, I need to understand that stuff going in, and I really didn't. So I think that sort of leads me to where I'm planning on taking things. And I think I want to take that in more of the direction of what I'm focused on. And that is in the context of startups, in the tech stack I'm using, and the stuff I'm learning, and the stuff that I know really, really well. Because I was trying to go into the Go world and that kind of thing when I don't think that I don't think I can be the sort of Go guy. Now, I don't think that means that I'm going to stop doing stuff on Go and stuff on backends. That is still going to be a core part of what I do, but it's not, I don't think that stuff like the Tapir app and that kind of thing, I don't know if that really should exist, or at least if it should exist yet. Maybe someday, but not yet, I don't think. So what I'm going to be focusing on is really the sort of moving things towards, like I said, startups. So when we're talking about software engineering and software development, there's a big thing that I think a lot of people miss is the sort of context in which people have opinions on things and different creators have opinions on things. My opinions are very different from the opinions that someone else is going to have, because it's informed by the experiences of what I do and what I use and what my goals are. The goals and experiences I have and the technologies I pick and the decisions I make and the recommendations I make are all built around my lens of things, which is very much the sort of startups MVP sort of world. That's where I live, and that's where I want to continue to live. But there's a lot of people who live in a very different world. There are people who go to their 9 to 5 and they're working at a giant company and they're working on a project with 30,000 commits that is 7 years old, and it has rigid structures, rigid guidelines, rigid everything on exactly how it all works. It's being deployed in a very specific way, worked on in a very specific way. That's not me. And that's not going to be me probably ever. I don't really want it to be. I really like what I do, just building out MVPs. I like building out startups, and I want to ultimately, my goal is to build and launch my own companies and be self-sufficient off that. I want to run this channel, run companies, do all that together and sort of scale that up. That is my goal for the next year or two. And I think that's achievable, to be honest, but a lot that has to happen between now and then. So all that perspective stuff is to say that I think with my channel, I want to focus it on stuff that matches and aligns with that perspective, because there's a lot of stuff. I don't think that there's a lot of stuff out there on startup stacks, on what goes into actually building the startup, what goes into actually running and scaling all these different pieces and putting it together. And I'm learning that as I go. And I think that's a direction I want to sort of take the channel. I'm not entirely certain on exactly how all of this is going to go. I know I've rambled back and forth on a bunch of these different things, but really the sort of key core thing that I'm really trying to focus on is the direction being what I know, startups, and making sure that when I put together these videos, they're more thought through. I know that this video is probably not going to feel nearly as thought through because this is purely just stream of consciousness. This is just me talking to you, sort of going through a list of things that I've been thinking about and going through. This is not, I'm not going over code here. I'm not trying to teach you anything here. I'm more just kind of discussing, where things have been and where they're going. I know I talk in circles a lot. I had someone say that like I talk really fast, which I didn't think I talked fast. I thought I talked really slow, but apparently I do. So that is what it is. I do have on here, like, I just want to make clear, like, I still am very much going to be focused on Go and backends. I want to make a lot of stuff on that, the like database structure I use, the backend architecture I use, really crystallizing all that and helping it make more sense for people, because I think that is a huge gap in the software engineering world. There is not a huge amount of stuff that really explains how the backend works, explains how you pick this stuff and how it all works. There's so much front end stuff out there, and I get why, because like at the end of the day, it's a lot more fun for me, the creator, and for you, the viewer, to look at a sick SVG animation than it is to look at a REST request taking 50 milliseconds less time because we optimized our server in some weird way. Like, it's just one is inherently more entertaining than the other, but that doesn't make one less valuable than the other. So I think still going over the back end stuff is really important, but the startup stuff I think is also really, really important. So that's sort of what I wanted to talk about, is just kind of give you the context on what I'm thinking and what I'm doing. Again, I'm really, really grateful for everyone who's been here, everyone who's supported me. I'm still figuring this out, and I'm still going to continue to figure this out. It's a learning process, and it really only has been about 3-4 months or so of actually doing this. There have been time off, so there's really only been 2 months of real work put into this. So there's a long way to go. There's a lot to learn, but I hope what you take away from this is that I'm learning, trying to take feedback, trying to put it all together, trying to figure out a good way forward and make it as good as humanly possible for everybody, and still, making it engaging, if that makes any sense. Thank you guys for watching. I have a lot more coming very soon. A lot of cool stuff. Make sure you're subscribed, liked, all that stuff, and have a good one.